Hello once again, thanks for joining me on my YouTube channel. I'm Matthew and this is Matthewnorthmusic. And if you haven't watched this channel before, because I think there'll probably be a few new people watching this video, then I make music videos, mostly about things to do with music, whether it's music technology, whether it's old music technology. I do reviews about records, I do reviews about box sets. I also do videos about electronics, and I also occasionally post the odd song. But today is very much a chit-chat video about a musical topic, which I do now and again. Now, I wasn't planning on doing this video, but I kind of thought, well, it's something that I haven't seen talked about a lot on the internet, apart from one video, which I'll mention a little bit later on. And by the way, if you do like these videos that I make, then please think about subscribing to the channel, because it really does help things grow along, and if you hit the little bell icon, you'll be notified about any new videos that will be published. And I tend to put about a video once a week, something like that, in that order. Anyway, today we're talking about Cliff Richard. Now, Cliff Richard is, for me, probably one of the great legends of the British musical world. He's he's written, or he's performed, because he doesn't really write that much. He's normally has people write songs for him, but he obviously has written songs. But he's made so many great records over the years, many hits, hundreds of singles, loads of albums. And he was always compared to Elvis as being, oh, Cliff Richard's like the British Elvis. But I kind of think that Cliff has one over on Elvis, and that was Elvis made loads and loads of films that were all rubbish, whereas Cliff's films, by and large, were actually quite good. And I've not seen them all. But if you want to see a Cliff Richard film, Wonderful Life, one of my favourites. I think that's a great little film. But also, he made some really rather great records. I mean, his first album, this one, just called Cliff, this was a live album recorded at Abbey Road Studios in front of an audience. And many people talk about the fact they think that The Sound of Fury by Billy Fury is Britain's great rock and roll debut album. But I think this is a better record. And some great playing on them. The Shads are in top form. It's I think it's a really good record. And anyway, I decided to go and see Cliff because I've never seen Cliff before, and he was on tour this week. I think as the time of me making this video, he's going to start a run of 2 nights at the Royal Albert Hall. And I went to see him in Bournemouth at the International Centre, and it wasn't a cheap ticket. It was £100 for a balcony seat. But as it was practically sold out, I kind of thought, well, if I don't get a ticket now and go and see him, then the opportunities are going to become less. Because as with a lot of these, what people refer to as heritage artists, they're not going to tour forever. Anyway, so the gig was 2 roughly 50-minute sets with an interval of half an hour. And I turned up to the venue. I looked at the merchandise store, and one thing I noticed is his merchandise is a lot cheaper than a lot of bands, where t-shirts were £25, hoodie fleeces were £35. I mean, a lot of bands now are charging 40 quid for a t-shirt. So fair play to Cliff rather, for selling his merchandise at a fair and reasonable price, and that should be applauded. Anyway, the gig started and he opened with Move It, the debut single and the song that everybody kind of, in that brilliant sort of recognisable riff at the start. And immediately, the first thing I noticed was the voice was a lot higher in the mix than the instrumentation, by quite some margin. I thought, maybe that's just how it's being mixed. But then it almost felt like the voice was too pure. And what I mean by that was the voice just sounded perfect. And I thought, wow, Cliff's brilliant. Listen to his voice, it's amazing. And then he comes to do the chat in between the songs. And it's almost, my first thought was, how can the person that sang so clearly then be talking in between the songs, and sounds, for want of a better word, it sounds like a much older person talking. And where the voice, the speaking voice, sounded slightly strained. Now, had the vocal performance of Move It sounded strained, I would have perfectly accepted. You know, Cliff's 85. And, you know, to be able to tour and to do 2 45-minute sets to that level takes some doing. But as the concert went on, there were things I was noticing. The first thing I noticed was there was no form whatsoever of improvisation on any song. You know, like, you know, somebody fronting a band, entertaining, might be in the middle, and, you know, they might call out the name of the guitar player who just did a solo, or they might react to something the crowd did. You know, they might say, "Oh yeah," or something. There was none of that. There was not one bit of interaction. The only interaction was when he was talking to the audience and in between songs. And actually, there wasn't really much crowd interaction there either. It was very much like a staged performance where he'd rehearsed and worked out every link that he says before each song, and probably does the same thing every night. And in a way, with, you know, a touring production like that, that's fair enough. That's kind of what you do. You keep everything the same every night, and then, even though for the musicians and the people working on it, it becomes very regimented, it does make it a solid, tight show. But even going into the second set, what I was noticing was there was no breaths in between lines. You know, someone would go sing, 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 sing. Didn't hear one breath at all the way through. But you did when he was talking. It was like, hello, blah, 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 da, 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 da. And that just made me think, is he actually singing live or is he miming? And I was trying really hard to listen for any imperfections. And I pretty much didn't notice any. There was one number where there was a little bit that I thought might have been off, but then it might not have been. I couldn't tell you for sure. But it just sounded too good. It sounded too clean, too pure. I mean, it sounded like he was recording, the vocals were recorded using, like, you know, a large diaphragm condenser mic, not a sort of stage vocal mic, because, you know, occasionally you get the odd pop, 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 and you didn't hear any of that either. It was just too pure. Now, before I went to see Cliff Richard, I hadn't looked up any reviews. I hadn't looked at any social media posts. I did look at Setlist FM just to see what songs he was doing, and the set was pretty consistent for the whole tour. And I looked at the songs. I didn't look in too much detail, but there was enough songs in there I knew that made me think, yeah, this will be all right. And I have to say, as entertainment, it was very enjoyable. And this is part of my summing up is going to be. As a piece of entertainment, it was brilliant. Cliff was moving around. He obviously looked like he was having a good time. The band looked like they were having a good time. And so you pay your money. Cliff is on stage. What you're hearing sounds good. Have you had your money's worth? But the thing is, I then took a little bit of a deep dive, and naturally the first thing I found whilst researching is Cliff Richard lip syncing was a video from Phil at Wings of Pegasus that he did about a year ago. And he proved without doubt on the song that he was analysing that it was all off a backing track and there was no live vocals at all. And so I thought I'd look on YouTube and see what's been uploaded and have a listen and see, try and make my own mind up. And what I wanted to do was just to listen to a song where there was at least 2 versions. And ideally a song that doesn't have too much, you know, stuff where you might expect there to be help and assistance with vocals. Now, we're all used to artists. I mean, I'm a massive fan of Roger Waters, and I know Roger Waters has a lot of vocals on backing tracks. The notes he can't hit, you know, they're on the backing track, and you kind of notice it. So yeah, it goes on. But there are songs Roger Waters does in his set live, and they are clearly completely live, complete with his, you know, Bob Dylan-esque vocal style that he kind of has these days. So you know what you get, and you know what you're getting with Roger Waters, because if you're a Roger Waters fan, you know this has been going on for years. But then there's other bands like the Eagles who are massively trying to cover up the fact that they've got, you know, Don Henley's vocals on backing track, which is why they have anyone that uploads a video to YouTube of the Eagles, it normally gets taken down straight away because they're trying to cover it up. But the thing is, you can't cover it up. You know, it's there to see, and the internet is such a beast now that you can't hide these things. I mean, I don't think Roger Waters has ever talked about it particularly, but you know, at the end of the day, he's not hiding it either. Now, the first thing people are going to say is, oh, but he's 85 years old, what do you expect? Well, Bob Dylan's 84, he doesn't have backing tape. Okay, a lot of people will say, well, yeah, you can hear he sounds bad, but I've seen Dylan twice. The first time I saw him, it sounded a bit ropey. The second time I saw him, which was in 2019, I thought he sounded great. I mean, he's Bob Dylan. You know, Neil Young's of a similar age. He's got nothing on a backing track. I still think he sounds great because he's authentic. And of course, the obvious one is Paul McCartney. You know, Paul McCartney's what, 83-ish? And he plays for twice as long as Cliff. He'll do a 2.5, 3 hour concert with no interval. And he'll do like up to 40 odd songs. And there's no backing track on Mac, and not that I could tell when I saw him. And I've certainly not seen any evidence that he's used any kind of pre-recorded vocals. And there again, my friend Arthur Brown, he's 83. He's been touring. I was with him on some dates a few weeks ago. There's certainly no backing tracks on there. So anyway, what I did as a test is I picked a song where I found two versions, and it was Summer Holiday. Now that is a song that does not have any vocal acrobatics in it whatsoever. It's a very simple song, and there's no reason why Cliff Richard shouldn't be singing that live. And what I did was I literally had it playing on YouTube, and I found the other version, and I lined it up at a point that would match, and I hit go, got it slightly out of sync, so I quickly paused the other one and started it again, and then pretty much it was bang on in sync. And I was listening to this through with a friend of mine. I was actually doing this while I was at work on my break, and we listened to it, and it's like, yeah, that is note for note identical. I mean, you could tell slightly differences in the drums and the lead guitar, although I got to say the lead guitarist was very consistent in his playing. And so what I've done is I've made a video which I'm not putting on here, but I've put it on another YouTube channel where I've taken two clips from two different performances. I've synced them up, and I've got the Bournemouth recording in one channel, and I've got the Brighton recording in the other. And I'll put a link to it in the description, and you can have a listen and see what you think. And by all means, go and find some other Cliff YouTube videos and try running them in sync and see if you can spot differences. I mean, I'd love to know if anyone has actually analysed every song of the set to see if they are all off tape, or if there are some that are performed live. But I'm sadly thinking that they are all actually pre-recorded backing tracks. That is what you're hearing through the PA. And also the level, the actual volume level, is substantially different from when he's talking to when he's singing. Now, obviously when you are singing at a higher level, but you know, there were moments where if I just grabbed my remote control for my telly, there was a couple of moments where he had the mic here, and then he had the mic here, and then he had the mic here. The volume level was identical, it hadn't moved. Now, even using compressors and limiters and whatnot, you know, it's possible to sort of sing here or sing here and it'd be roughly the same level, but you would notice a slight difference. But the real clincher for me is when he did this, and then his voice was still coming out the PA. And I've found a few comments on various forums where other people have noticed that as well. Now, whether that's because he always had like a second layer of backing vocals on the backing track to thicken the sound up, because there was a couple of points where it sounded like there was more than one vocal track. So he might have had some of his own backing vocals on the track as well, not sure. But certainly when you do this and you're singing and it's coming out at full level with the same tonal quality, then yeah, I think it's kind of a given that that's off a backing track. So what do I think about all of this? Well, I do feel disappointed. I feel disappointed that I bought a ticket to go and see someone perform live, and while they are performing on stage, what you're hearing isn't that performance off the stage. I think any live performance, what you see on stage, what you see people doing, is what you should be hearing. Now, I play in a band that uses a backing track. My band, All Living Fear, have always used drum machines live, apart from one gig. And we've always had synthesizers on the backing track. And it was originally we used to play it off a tape, then a mini disc, and then a hard solid state audio recorder. And spoiler alert, I recently bought this. This is an old Akai, not Akai, Roland. Akai is the sampler that I did a video just last week about. This is a Roland sequencer from the late 80s. And if I can learn how to use this properly, I'm considering doing an All Living Fear gig where we play all the backing stuff off actual hardware sequenced off this, so no computers involved. If that works, I think that'll be good fun. But yeah, no, I have no objections to backing tracks, click tracks, etc. I mean, every rock band, even a lot of heavy metal bands, they play to a click track. Not always because they've got music on the backing track, because in a lot of cases they don't. It's purely to keep things like video projections and lighting in sync with the music. And that's been the standard thing for probably the last 20 years, that they have so the drummer's hearing a tick tock tock tick tock tock type thing in his ear or her ear, and they're just keeping everything in sync. So I have no problem with bands using backing tracks or sequences. But what I do have a problem with is if I saw a guitar player on stage doing a guitar solo and it would be evident that what they're playing is not what's coming out the speakers. Same with the bass or any other actual instruments that are on stage. So anyway, summing up then, what do I think? Should Cliff not do this? Well, I think there's two sides to this. Cliff, and probably his management and his fans certainly, they want to see Cliff Richard on stage doing those same 22, 25 hits, maybe even 30 hits. I can't remember how many songs he played now, but they want to see all those songs on stage. And what they don't want to see are those songs done differently to the record, because every song had the same arrangement pretty much, with the exception of things like We Don't Talk Anymore, because that was obviously extended to be like its own encore. But they want people that go and see Cliff Richard want to hear the songs they know played in the way that they know. And that's fair enough. Would I have been disappointed if Cliff Richard had done a load of those songs but he'd done them differently? Like in a different key, possibly some of them might have been a bit slower, and he wouldn't have been running around on the stage so much? I'd have been more than happy with that. I would rather have seen that than just seeing a slick, Sunday night at the London Palladium sort of, stage perfect performance with him running around and dancing and stuff. I would rather have heard the real voice. But that being said, I'm not the person that is Cliff Richard's target audience. I was so not the target audience in that venue. It was, well, you could imagine what the age demographic was: 65 and overs, the gender demographic mostly female, with a few husbands accompanying their wives, shall we say. That was kind of it. So they know their target audience, they know what they want to do, and what they do services that target audience. So, 90% of the people that were there would have left very happy, thinking they'd watched this brilliant live show. Interestingly as well, there was no cameras and no big screens. So, and I think that was quite deliberate, because at an arena show these days, quite often you do expect an element of screens and production, and there wasn't any. But there again, the screens are always slightly out of sync anyway, so actually that probably wouldn't have made much of a difference. So yeah, summing up then, if anyone from the Cliff Richard organisation is watching this video and you disagree with anything I say, please get in touch and let me know. Let me know what you think. This video is not a dig at Cliff Richard at all, far from it. It's more an expression of disappointment. Disappointment that we've paid our money to watch a show, and the majority of it, if not all of the singing on it, was mimed or lip synced. Even if he'd been singing and there was a bit of the track as well, just to thicken up his voice, that wouldn't have been so bad. I'd have coped with that, but all of it sounding so perfect. There wasn't even any attempt to try and make any of it sound, put the odd slightly fluffy note in here and there just to make it. I mean, maybe there was and I didn't notice, but to me it all just sounded a bit too perfect. Anyway, that's the end of this video. Hope you found it interesting. If you did, hit the old like, subscribe, share and whatnot, and I'll catch you on the next one.